Good afternoon. Welcome to Heidegger 1324, and today we will look at a paper by Terry Marks-Tarlow, Fractal Geometry as a Bridge Between Realms. I wonder here if my colleague here could mention something about Terry Marks-Tarlow from the net.
Yes, she has also written another interesting paper. Terry has also written another interesting paper entitled Fractal Entanglement Between Observer and Observed, that you have to go through next time, perhaps in future.
Indeed.
Absolutely. So she has a PhD. She's a licensed clinical psychologist in private practice in Santa Monica. She's a visiting professor at Italian Università Niccolò Cusano, London, etc., etc., etc. And she's also an artist. She has co-created and curates an annual exhibition of visual and performance arts, Mirrors of the Mind, the psychotherapist as artist, as well as an annual exhibition of the performing arts, Theater of the Mind, the psychotherapist as performing artist. Dr. Marks-Tarlow has authored and co-edited numerous books, including Play and Creativity in Psychotherapy, Truly Mindful Coloring, Awakening Clinical Intuition, and Clinical Intuition in Psychotherapy, and Psyche's Veil, all of which she has illustrated herself. Dr. Marks-Tarlow has presented workshops and seminars internationally and nationally. Her second book, Psyche's Veil, is about nonlinear dynamics. This year she was awarded by the highest honor, Distinguished Service to the Field of Psychology. Her book, Awakening Clinical Intuition, has also received the Gradiva nomination for Best Book. Dr. Marks-Tarlow embodies the balance of life between play, imagination, and creativity through her dance, art, and yoga. The creativity also has been expressed musically through writing operetta librettos with Juliet Teacher and composer Jonathan Dave. The first opera, Cracked Orlando, premiered in New York City in 2010 with the ballet. The second opera, Oroborium, is scheduled to premiere at Lincoln Center in 2018. That's please, Marks-Tarlow.
Thank you very much for that splendid presentation of today's author. And we were earlier speaking in episode 3 to 1323 about the right brain, and I now realized that I haven't given the microphone to the questioners earlier, so I hope the sound quality hasn't been too low. This is the first time I in the space realize I need to give the microphone. So we'll see how the quality was. But that goes to show that Ian McGilchrist is doing huge success and coming back to reality, the senses and perception. Fractal geometry as a bridge between realms. Abstract. This chapter describes fractal geometry as a bridge between the imaginary and the real, mind and matter, conscious and the unconscious. Fractals are multidimensional objects with self-similar detail across size and/or timescales. Carl Jung conceived of a number as the most primitive archetype of order. Serving to link observers with the observed. Whereas Jung focused upon natural numbers as the foundation for order that is already conscious in the observer. I offer up the fractal geometry as the underpinnings for a dynamic, unconscious, destined never to become fully conscious. Throughout nature, fractals model the complex, recursively branching structures of self-organizing systems. When they serve at the edges of open systems, fractal boundaries articulate a paradoxical zone that simultaneously separates as it connects. When modeled by Spencer Brown's mathematical notation, full interpretation between inside and outside edges translates to a distinction that leads to no distinction. By occupying the infinitely deep space between dimensions and levels of existence, fractal boundaries contribute to the notion of intersubjectivity, where self and other become most entwined. They also exemplify re-entry dynamics of Varela's autonomous system, the autopoiesis, plus Douglas Hofstadter's ever-elusive tangled hierarchy between brain and mind. Introduction. Any distinction is wholly imaginary, an act of creation. Each proof that convinces a proof that uses imaginary values to reason to a true answer. Mathematics is about the consequence of making a distinction. As if there was such a thing as a distinction. It is all imaginary, and all the imaginary is real. Louis Kaufman. The capacity to make distinctions between this and that lies at the base of human consciousness. Throughout the lifespan, a key distinction involves discerning inner from outer processes. That is, we must distinguish products of imagination, memory, and dreams from outside objects, people and events in the environment. British psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott introduces the significance of childhood play for creating, discovering inner versus outer realms of experience. By speculating that symbol, self and culture all emerge in the transitional space between mother and child. Likewise, Australian psychiatrist Russell Mears details developmental processes by which young children shuttle back and forth between incorporating outside objects into imaginary play. and breaking away from play to attend to goings on in the immediate environment. Through this shuttling of attention, an ever-moving boundary is established between the interior dialogue of a personal self and the exterior dialogue of a social self. Whereas children's inner focus dictates the perspective of the observer, their outer focus illuminates objects and territory under observation. We might assume clear distinctions exist between observers and observed. But this is not necessarily the case. When a schizophrenic cannot tell the difference between an object hallucinated and one that exists in reality, fuzzy boundaries between inner and outer realms become the stuff of psychosis. Yet similar fuzzy boundaries also characterize the mindsets of visionaries able to make their dreams come true. Clean boundaries between inner and outer realms imply a Cartesian split as represented by the true/false, either or distinctions of classic Aristotelian logic. According to this view, something either exists inside the observer or outside, but not in both places at once. By contrast, fuzzy boundaries offer more choices. with fuzzy logic permitting an infinite number of distinctions between true and false. This is illustrated by the fuzzy logic cube in figure 2. It's depicted in the writing here. If 1 and 0 represent true and false respectively, then the cube's corners are anchored by binary sets that characterize traditional logic. Inside the cube, a variety of fuzzy sets express degrees of truth. With the center point occupying the completely ambiguous, if not paradoxical, position of being just as true as it is false. Writing about that magical, ambiguous zone between observer and observed, Lou Kaufman examines various systems of logic and mathematics. As the epigraph above indicates, Kaufman highlights paradox as he underscores the hidden action of the imaginary in bringing forth the real world of everyday distinctions. This chapter follows in the paradoxical spirit of Winnicott and Kaufman by investigating the play between imaginary real, observer, observed, as detectable within fractal geometry. I argue for the importance of fractal dynamics to model entangled relations between observer and observed, where each fully interpenetrates the other. By understanding the broad foundation of fractal geometry, as it involves infinite recursion on the imaginary plane, we can enhance our understanding of reality as finitely perceived in nature. Conversely, by comprehending how fractals manifest ubiquitously at the joints in nature, we can expand our understanding of the infinitely extending self-referential nature of mind. Of special interest here is the deep relativity that exists between observer and observed at all scales of observation. Such that the closer we look, the more we can see. I introduce self-similarity as a newly discovered symmetry in nature that represents the sign of identity. Explored semiotically, self-similarity can be seen as a distinction that leads to no distinction. I relate this paradoxical equivalence of change and no change to the operation of cancellation. Within Spencer Brown's arithmetic of first distinctions, as well as to Francisco Varela's re-entry dynamics characteristic of autonomous system. My main thesis is that fractal boundaries whether between inside, outside, self, other, subjective, objective levels, or conscious, unconscious underpinnings of experience. Represent an imaginary real foundation for the entangled creation of world and psyche. Number as the archetype for conscious order. If a group of objects is deprived of every single one of its properties or characteristics, there still remains at the end its number, which seems to indicate that number is something irreducible. Something which helps more than anything else to bring order into the chaos of appearances. Carl Jung. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung came to view number as the most primitive quality of existence. By crafting an archetypal theory, his theory of number doubled over as a theory of mind. Jung attributed to number the power to bring order into the chaos of appearances, referring to material existence not as objectively conceived, but rather as subjectively perceived by an observer. Here number links observers and observed. Inner and outer worlds in a way parallel to second order cybernetics. In the footsteps of Margaret Mead and Heinz von Förster, this viewpoint is carried forth eloquently by the musings of Ranulph Glanville. The whole point of second-order cybernetics is that it asserts there is no observation without an observer. there's nothing spoken without a speaker. There's no action without an actor. Jung viewed number as the realm where mind and matter meet. Sometimes referred to as the psychoid level of existence, and at other times the unus mundus. Jung intuited that the realm of mathematical abstraction is discovered insofar as it uncovers quantitative facts about the workings of the external world. At the same time, it is invented as an abstraction in the mind, indicating something qualitative about the subjective realm of meaning. For Jung, number serves as the most fundamental structure of perceived reality. The place where observers and observed merge at the level of synchronicity, symbol and meaning. In building a bridge between mind and matter, Jung and his dedicated follower, Marie-Louise von Franz, were interested primarily in the counting numbers as symbol and founts of inexhaustible metaphor during the production of conscious experience. Whether in dream, mythology or art, the number one tends to symbolize undifferentiated unity. Two signifies the first distinction of duality. 3 indicates dynamic change and movement away from the static opposition. And 4 suggests stable manifestation. In this chapter, I depart from the natural numbers that interested Jung to number as manifested naturally in what Benoit Mandelbrot calls the fractal geometry of nature. I argue for a link between imaginary numbers as iterated recursively on the complex plane and self-reflexive underpinnings of the dynamic unconscious. A precedent for my approach exists in the work of Jungian psychologist and mathematician Robin Robertson. Robertson advances Jung's search for the archetype of order by tracing a history of the qualitative development of human consciousness based on the evolution of quantitative mathematical discovery. Robertson identifies 4 stages of evolution. Which I describe next, before placing fractal geometry into the context of the 4th. The first stage involves knowledge of the counting numbers as relates to primitive consciousness, characteristic of many traditional tribes and young children. Here, the inner contents of the unconscious are unwittingly projected into the outer conscious experience. In cybernetic terms, observer and observed are unconsciously merged during the act of discovering distinctions in ongoing experience. Translated into the language of contemporary neuroscience, this stage depends upon procedural and implicit memory. Whose capacity is hardwired into the primitive brain. This type of memory is unconscious. In the more contemporary meaning of the word, embraced by neuroscientists like Jaak Pansap, Alan Shore and Daniel Zeal. whereas Freud's unconscious consists of repressed knowledge dynamically pushed beneath the surface of conscious awareness. Contemporary neuroscientists view much of the brain's work as unconscious in a different sense. The self-organization of autonomic and limbic systems occurs subcortically. Beneath the threshold of consciousness, operating on timescales too rapid ever to reach conscious awareness. This distinction between material pushed out of awareness and that which awareness can never reach becomes critical to my later assertion of fractal geometry as the abstract formalization for the ever-receding threshold between conscious and unconscious processes. During stage 2 of collective human consciousness, zero emerges as a symbol around the dawn of the Christian era. Within Persian semiotics, zero represents an important portmanteau, a sign that carries double meaning. In this case, by embodying paradox. Zero is a symbol form of nothing. That also means something. In modern number notation, zero serves as a placeholder that enables us endlessly to recycle the same 10 digits. By eliminating the need for a different symbol, to represent each new number, zero provides an invisible underground unity to the number system. Here we see early glimmerings of Kaufmann's virtual logic. The play of imagination that sharpens focus on real distinctions. Recycled digits brought the first formal sign of fractal dynamics within mathematics, albeit in inchoate form. Because full arithmetic expression involves self-similar nested structure on ever grander scales of magnitude across the tenths, hundreds, and thousand number columns. Whereas modern number notation represents a somewhat trivial example of self-similarity, in that it lacks the functional dimensionality of true fractal form. SUNY philosophers Patrick Grimm, Gary Marr, and Paul St. Denis assert significantly that all of mathematics and logic can be modeled on the computer as an infinitely expanding fractal system. Figure 3 illustrates, as depicted, one aspect of their system, how paradoxes of self-reference can be iterated on the computer. The classical liar states, this sentence is false. In the interpersonal version, Socrates asserts, Plato speaks falsely, while Plato counters, Socrates speaks truly. Fuzzy logic allows infinite valued variations, starting with the following two assertions. X is X as true as Y. Y is as true as X is false. The assertions are translated mathematically as follows. I will not bring that up. Excuse me. As these equations then are iterated on the computer, fractal images appear when escape time diagrams are colored according to how long it takes various pairs of points to cross certain thresholds. Robertson's third stage in the evolution of modern consciousness emerged during the Renaissance with the formal introduction of infinity. Using zero as an anchor, humans flew to previously unseen heights of abstraction. The invention of calculus, independently by Newton and Leibniz, captured both symbols of zero and infinity concretely within the single concept of a limit. Calculus permits the human mind to delve even more flexibly under the surface of moving and irregular processes into the chaos of imaginary waters. In order to resurface with a new perception of order. The simultaneous invention of perspective in art, plus René Descartes' method of analytic geometry, gave humankind an even sharper, downright three-dimensional view of distinctions in the natural world. I think I end there. It was an interesting start. Thank you very much and have a very pleasant afternoon. Bye for now. So here you can get the details.